Welcome to the Fantasy Trading Room, hosted by Faceoff Sports Network. And today, we're going to be looking at 5 must-draft rookies for 2024 fantasy football. Starting off with Jayden Daniels, who's being drafted as the quarterback 11 around pick 102. And I was on Jayden Daniels even earlier in the offseason when he was going at pick 130-ish, quarterback 18. And I was smashed drafting him all day, every single draft at that price. Now, obviously, he has risen a lot. But at this current price, we're reevaluating it, and I'm still drafting him a lot because let's just compare him to another similar player, Anthony Richardson, right? Now, he's going as the quarterback 6, pick 56, and I'm not going out of my way to get him in every single draft, but I think it's fair value. I like it because it opens up potential stacks. So I'm drafting Richardson there, and I think that's where he should be going. Daniels, on the other hand, is going significantly later than him, and I really don't understand why. So let's compare the two. First, as runners, especially in college. So at LSU, Daniels had 885 rushing yards in 2022 and 1.1 thousand rushing yards in 2023 with 4.8 yards per carry and 8.4 yards per carry. Now, Richardson is second last year in college, had 409 rushing yards, 7.9 yards per carry, and 654 rushing yards, 6.3 yards per carry. So you can clearly tell from a statistical perspective, Jayden Daniels was the better runner in college. Now, does that mean he's the better real-life runner? Does that mean he's going to be better than the NFL? No, maybe not, because Richardson has that bigger frame. He probably has more touchdown upside around the goal line, which is important for fantasy. But if we're looking at from a straight statistical perspective, which, if I need to remind you, that's how we get fantasy points, Daniels has been better. So I would argue that Daniels is the better pure runner. We have some concerns about him staying healthy, but at a 1-year window, I think Daniels is probably going to have more rushing yards. And even though those touchdowns may go to Richardson, I would rather have Daniels than Richardson from a running perspective this year. Now, we're looking at them as a passer, and obviously Richardson was extremely raw in college, but he's a second-year player, right? So he's had time to develop. Well, it's great being in the NFL building, and I will say that's good for his development. It's not like he got the game reps that he needed, especially for him where he's so raw. That's what he needs, not to throw in practice, not to work with a bunch of coaches. That's great, but he needs some live game reps. And he didn't get that last year. He basically missed the entire year. Daniels, on the other hand, sure, he doesn't have as much of a ceiling, but he was playing last year. He was working on his game in college where he was under an environment where he could thrive and work on his game as a passer. That being said, in the long term, Richardson dynasty, 2 to 3 years from now, yes, he will probably be the better passer and better player overall if he continues to develop. But we're looking at a 1-year window, and Daniels right now should be the better passer. And I truly believe he is from what I've seen out of Daniels and what I've seen out of Richardson. So that makes Daniels the better passer for year 1. Richardson, this is basically his year 1. And Daniels also is probably the better pure runner. Now, the difference is Richardson's on the Colts, which is a world better situation than the Commanders. The Commanders have a new coaching regime. It's been a mess in there for years. All they have is Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson, who hasn't been great, an old Austin Eckler, Brian Robinson, a rookie tight end, versus the Colts, who have A.D. Mitchell, Josh Downs, Michael Pittman, Jonathan Taylor, Shane Steichen, who's been great with quarterbacks. I absolutely trust him. So, yeah, I think Anthony Richardson should be going higher because that situation is significantly better. But if we're looking at them as players, I think they're pretty comparable in this 2024 season. So, yeah, the situation change should have Richardson there. I think that having him around pick 56 is a fair price. But Daniels, I'm not knocking him down basically double the spots. That's 50 spots fewer than Richardson. I would have him maybe 20 to 30, and I still feel like that's pretty harsh because the Commanders are bad, but it's not the worst situation. It's not a Bryce Young level bad situation, okay? And especially because he has rushing upside, that also gives him a much higher floor. Now, our next player is Jonathan Brooks, being drafted as the RB24, around pick 89. And the main thing we're going to break down and the main question people have about him is that ACL injury. Now, I'm not going to say I'm a doctor, and it's extremely tough to predict, but here's a few things that I want to outline. He's probably going to be back by week 1, according to Last Word on Sports. Week 1 is 9 months after the original injury, and he will be back on the field. Maybe not full percent. They are saying that he'll probably be full strength by midseason at the latest, but that's kind of similar to what Breece Hall was last year. He was on the field. First 4 weeks wasn't great, but even by week 5. So I think that's very possible. Brooks, he was fantastic. And the thing is, just ACL injuries aren't what they used to be. We have modern medicine now. They're extremely different. And if you're going to say Breece Hall is a different breed like Adrian Peterson, I don't think that's as great of an argument because Brooks and Breece Hall are both second-round picks taken in a similar range. Neither of them were really generational prospects. And if Brooks hadn't torn his ACL, I think he would be getting just as much hype and be getting called a great pick just as much as Hall was coming out of Iowa State. So I think the two are actually very comparable, and I think that's a pretty fair assessment to get that injury. Now, here's my reasoning. So Brooks didn't have to declare this year. He's still a young back, and NIL is now in college, so he would be getting paid to go back. However, he decided to declare coming off an ACL injury. So obviously, he knows something that we don't. He knows how he feels. He knows he's probably going to be ready early on than what's expected, and he knows that he's going to get good draft capital, right? And the Panthers, not only do they pick him in the second round, but they trade up to get him. And keep in mind, they're the ones with the medical record, so let's trust them. Brooks is a fantastic talent, and he's going to give you RB2 production more than likely. Maybe you might need to fill in for the first 4 weeks, but he's going to give you RB production after then at his floor. He has low-end RB1 production, and in underdog drafts, in your home leagues, that is what's going to win you your league. Now, our next guy is going to be Xavier Legette. We're going to drop down a little bit. Wide receiver 65, ADP 138. And I really didn't like Xavier Legette at all. He's a fifth-year senior, late breakout, and it's a lot easier to produce when you're going up against 18, 19-year-old quarterbacks, right? However, on film, he was extremely impressive. I can't deny that at all. He has a size-speed combination that you just can't teach. He's a threat with the ball in his hands, and he wins in the catch point quite frequently. So, his stats didn't hold much weight, but he did have 71 catches for 1,255 yards and 7 touchdowns. So it's not like he's never been productive. That said, that prospect profile doesn't typically pan out. The one example I have is Terry McLaurin, but he went to Ohio State. So, it's a lot different. But I'm kind of using this way of thinking for other prospects, and I think I was a little unfair to Xavier Legette. COVID has affected this rookie class, and I think it kind of skews the late breakout age a ton. On top of that, I know he was playing basketball. He had some personal issues. It just seemed like his profile wasn't very black and white like some of these other late breakouts are. And the thing about him is he may be good from an NFL perspective. He's a big and fast X receiver, but I just don't know if he's going to draw targets. However, the Panthers don't look like a great landing spot on the surface, but there's a lot of opportunity for him. So Deontay Johnson is going to be the number one target. He's that guy that's going to be your route technician, but he's not a superstar alpha receiver. So there is definitely some meat on the bones for Legette and anyone else. And that wide receiver core is absolutely awful besides Legette. So instead of being, wide receiver 3 or 4, he should honestly be used as the wide receiver 2 pretty early on. And I kind of expect him to be, more of a very like DK Metcalf, where Deontay Johnson, we're also expecting that he only had 10.6 points per game and 11.7 points per game these last 2 seasons. So we're kind of expecting him to get better. There's a real chance that Legette just puts everything together. He's on a roll. He's steamrolling, and he's the alpha receiver in this offense. I also think that this offense with Bryce Young and now Dave Canales is going to be a lot better. We saw what Dave Canales did with Geno Smith. We saw what he did with Baker Mayfield. And Bryce Young is, in my opinion, a more talented quarterback than both of them. So I think the Panthers' offense should be a lot better. And also, let's not forget, Adam Thielen was basically a low-end wide receiver 1 for a large majority of the year last year. So that says a lot about what Young is able to do with these receivers. But the bottom line is, when we're getting this low, Xavier Legette has upside. And I don't really want to take a Rashid Shaheed, a wide receiver 2, for the Saints' purgatory offense, who has been in the NFL forever. I would much rather take a shot on a rookie who has a great prospect profile, at least from an athletic standpoint, because he has all the upside in the world if he's able to continue and keep putting things together to absolutely crush fantasy football. At this point in drafts, I'm drafting purely for upside because we're past round 12. Nothing else really matters. I want a guy that can move the needle for me and win my fantasy league. So I really enjoyed watching the film on Jermaine Burton, and I was able to attend the NFL draft. You can check back here to prove I'm not lying. And what I heard around there was the reason he fell was largely due to character concerns. Now, I don't know how true that is, but I think that he's a lot better player than where he's drafted. That being said, he was still a day 2 pick, which increases his fantasy football hit rate by a large margin. So in college, he was used as a deep threat, had 798 yards, 8 touchdowns on only 39 receptions in 2023. So we can tell he's getting targeted deep down the field, 20.5 yards per reception, which is pretty insane, especially for that Alabama offense that, really didn't have many other good receivers. So I kind of expected him to draw a lot more targets, even though that's not necessarily his role. But I was super impressed with his burst off the lines. He has great hands and obviously fantastic speed. So he's a player I like. He's a good talent, not just penciling him in there because he's going to the Bengals. And the Bengals aren't a dream landing spot by any means. It's a good spot, but it's not a dream spot because for Burton, he's a deep threat. And right now, that role is currently T. Higgins. He's been the deep threat. He's one of the better ones in the NFL, but what they don't have is a wide receiver 3 slot guy. I mean, they have Trenton Irwin, who is just not good at all. And there's really easily a pass for Burton to get on the field without injuries. However, let's also keep in mind that T. Higgins hasn't been able to stay healthy last year. He's been missing games before that, and he only played in 12 games last year. And that's not including 4 games where he played less than 70% of the snaps. Now, recently, we've seen these wide receivers get paid, and T. Higgins also believes he deserves a contract extension, which obviously hasn't happened yet. He's been posting on social media, some cryptic messages, and there's clearly a lot of beef. Now, I don't believe that T. Higgins is going to sit out, but something that kind of makes sense to me was I expect him to be extremely cautious, like it kind of seems like he has been in the past. Now, you would think that, it's his, contract year. He needs to prove it. But the wide receiver market has gone crazy. I don't think he really cares about coming back to the Bengals, proving anything to them. I think he just wants to get paid. It doesn't matter if it's the Bengals or if it's elsewhere. So he doesn't really feel like he has to prove anything because he's very talented. I wouldn't be surprised if he's very cautious with his health because even if the Bengals say, okay, you still haven't been able to stay on the field, I still don't know if you bring exactly what we need to the table and it's worth paying you that much money. There will be a team that will pay him. I promise you that right now. Receivers are getting paid an absurd rate, and T. Higgins is too talented to not get paid. So, with that being said, not only could Jermaine Burton work into that slot role, but as his natural role as a deep threat, I think there's a good chance that he could get on the field for, 3, 4, 5 weeks and provide a ton of spike value, especially when we're talking about best ball leagues. Now, as a slot, he didn't really crush ever in college. He wasn't very familiar. But in 2022, he had 138 slot snaps versus 211 wide snaps. So not a crazy difference. And he had 40 catches, 677 yards, and 7 touchdowns that season. So it's obviously not his number one strength. But I think the Bengals will find a way to get him on the field, play him in the slot. They will get looks to him outside because they don't want Trenton Irwin playing often. They don't want really anyone else as a wide receiver 3. And Tyler Boyd as the wide receiver 3 for the Bengals had 11.5 points per game and 10.4 points per game. In both of the 2 seasons, Joe Burrow was healthy. And personally, I think Burton has a lot more upside, especially with that big playability like we were just talking about. So it honestly seems like 10, 11 points should be his floor, assuming he does win the wide receiver 3 role. And he has the upside to go for 20, 25 points on a week-to-week basis, to be quite honest with you. But I think he honestly could finish a lot better than 10 points per game, maybe get up to that 12, 13 points per game. And at that range, you're really moving the needle for where he's being drafted. Now, to wrap things up, we're going to go with Jaylen Wright, who's being drafted as the RB37 around pick 153. And I've really had a roller coaster of emotions with Wright this offseason. But my verdict at the moment is he's a must-draft guy. So as a prospect, I was really all in on Wright after watching his film and seeing, you can tell right away, he has elite explosiveness. I will say his boxes were extremely light on Tennessee, but I'm not really looking at the production, not really, taking that with a grain of salt. And I like his mold more so than anything than what I saw in film. So he has 4.38 speed, but also a BMI of 30.1. So I really think he can handle a heavy workload. And he's playing next to Devon Achane, a smaller back. So that's very important to me. I think they will rely on Wright to carry a good amount of the load next year. Now, obviously, we have Raheem Mostert. And I think there's about a 0% chance that Mostert does anywhere near what he did last year. I'm not saying, he might regress a little bit. I think he is going to completely fall off a cliff. Let's just look at this. He had the best season of his career at 31 years old, which is extremely far past the age cliff of running backs. Not only that, but he's played in 12 or more games 3 times in his NFL career. So we're looking at a guy that has an injury history, is going to be turning 32 years old, and we're saying, he'll probably have a significant role in that offense. Are you sure about that? Because I'm not. I think Mostert can completely fall off a cliff. Maybe he's good for the first few weeks, but down the stretch, I totally expect Mike McDaniel to utilize him in that Raheem Mostert-like role, but he's obviously has a lot more juice and is way, way, way more explosive than Mostert. So it's a great scheme fit. McDaniels and the Dolphins know how to use these fast guys, and Wright has burners. So I really do expect him to take over that role in the end of the year. And the Dolphins are an offense. They are a very ambiguous backfield, but if you can figure out who is going to be getting touches, and I think it's Jaylen Wright, especially when it's this late, why not take a dart throw on him? Because if you're right, you're getting an player who's in an offense that has scored the 3rd most points per game last year, 27.9, and you're getting him basically at pick 150. I've seen him fall as late as 160, 170 at times. So he is dirt cheap. He has the explosiveness and second half ability to win your fantasy football league. So that's going to be it. Let me know what you guys think about this list. If you would agree with my list, let me know down below. If you think I'm an idiot, let me know down below as well, and we can have a good debate. But again, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.